So my topic is from sleep to Zen is pretty much about my transformation and what I went through, because that's what everyone asked me when they realized that I was a former monk. And for the past few years, everyone that I meet, they would just ask me the same question: what happened to you, DK? What were the things that you went through? And I got kind of tired of repeating. So I want to take this opportunity as well, just to take you through a photographic journey of what actually happened. But before we jump to that, I'll just share a bit of what I do. And so, as you all know, that I'm actually a former monk, a former Buddhist monk. And there are three main Buddhist traditions: the Mahayana, the Theravada, and of course the Vajrayana, which is which their focus is on Tantra. So I was originally ordained in the Thai forest tradition, which is the picture on the left. On the right, I actually went to a Zen school in France to practice. So I've always been very I would say, inquisitive. So I did not just want to learn from one school of thought. I want to just run around and try to understand what a different wisdom that they can bring. And of course, after traveling around the world for about 6 years or so, I discovered that every path leads to the same goal. And this is what I experience in science as well when they do the neurofeedback, which I'll get into that later on. So while I was a monk, I authored 2 books, and they're free for downloads as well. I'll be happy to share with you the links to download later on if you would like to ask me. And so these are things that I did not imagine that I would do, because I was a high school dropout, all right? And authoring 2 books. So. And part of what I do, this is at Singapore Cancer Society. I'm helping one of the principal psychologists in SGH to run a mindfulness research on the effects of a 4-week mindfulness program for caregivers and cancer survivors. Because cancer survivors, they always have this fear of when's the next cancer going to hit. So just part of the research that we do. These are all secular. They are non-religious and non-spiritual. And these are just, this is what I did for Caregivers Alliance. They're all mindfulness-based practices. And also, I engage students. This is a group of student volunteers who they was headed by a teacher, a school teacher of theirs, and after they graduate from secondary school or high school, they were assigned to go back to the schools to provide free tuition and free coaching for the underprivileged students. So I offer my support and taught the organizers how to facilitate mindfulness sessions, to make things more interesting for the students. So it's a fun thing to do, to work with students to the next. I feel that we should invest in the younger generation. I believe a lot of us belong kind of to the younger generation right now as well. Okay. And yeah, this is just part of Cancer Society again. It was organized by MindFi, which was a mindfulness app that I consulted from. I believe some of you, I think Hendrick or Jen is going to have questions on how we structured emotional intelligence practices based on the user's mood, to boost their day. And mindfulness training. This was in a school. So as I mentioned, I was a high school dropout, and my teachers really hated me. I was kicked out from the same secondary school for 3 times. And I went on to 2 private schools. One of them was an international school. I got kicked out as well. So I caused a lot of problems in school back then. So when this particular government school invited me to do a mindfulness meditation session for their teachers and the principal, I literally stood there and I burst out laughing, because it was so funny. Now I'm helping them to deal with stress. In the past, I was the stress. So I really went up on stage and I started laughing. So I believe in authenticity, So I mean, live, that you just have to laugh it off, right? Of course, I started a center when I came back to Singapore, and we do engage the younger adults as well in mindfulness and spiritual practices. And of course, I'm a spiritual teacher as well. Right, so I do have a bunch of followers that I engage to teach them things, all the woo stuff that people like to think about or talk about, or becoming a psychonaut. So these are just some of the things that I do, healing as well. And the picture on the left is I'm actually doing a kind of energy transference. People trust me a lot for all this kind of stuff. And in this picture, these are spiritual empowerments that I do. In Sanskrit, we call them Shaktipat. It's where I infuse my consciousness. I project my consciousness into the other person just by touching their heads. So it requires a lot of practice to get to that. And it's a happy thing, and I enjoy what I'm doing. You know, these are just a bunch of my students from mindfulness circle. So why? I'm not trying to sell myself. All right, why am I sharing so much about me? Number one is to get to allow you to know me better. And the other thing is that, I mean, looking at all these pictures and just a brief summary of what I do, perhaps you would trust me. You know, you look at everyone is smiling, they're happy. Maybe you'll come to me. Maybe someone wants coaching, will come to me. But then all this will not happen because of this. So that was me on the right. Perhaps you have some faith or you're interested in what I do in the previous few slides, but in this picture, would you trust your partner to come and learn meditation from me? You know, would you want me to even be here to speak? There's an interesting thing in our society that we tend to just judge. And this picture is from my past, but if I did not show you what I did, if Jen and Eric did not introduce me, and you just saw this guy's picture, what would you think? You probably would just, you know, ignore this picture altogether. And I believe that society sometimes can be so judgmental that we forget to give others a chance. And we can be so conditioned that we forgot that we have a choice to make a difference. We have a chance to jump out, but if the world cuts away our chances because of the judgments and the stereotypes, then how can we improve? So I'll take you through, before I went into the whole journey of monkhood where my life changed radically, I was partying almost every day. I was working for my dad. I did not, I worked for my dad just for the money. So, and I was just chasing after money and just partying a lot, drinking, and of course, getting late a lot. So, but it did not bring me happiness at all. So we went pretty extreme that we can book the entire beach club just to ourselves to have fun, to get high, you know. That's what happens when you hang out with a bunch of rich kids back in those days. So I was only about 20 years old or so. And building the pool as well. And we even booked the entire VIP rooms of the clubs and got really smashed up all the time. So that was my life. I like what Eric typed. I'm not going into the onsen. Yeah. So it was just crazy. I was pretty having a good time in my adolescence, but I was getting lost in life. I did not know what's happiness. I had the luxuries, hang out with friends that just knew about luxuries and getting drunk and getting late and all that kind of stuff, you know. So it was just an intense life that I had. I thought, but something was missing within me. Oops, I did not censor one of the pictures, so it was pretty crazy. So I'll skip this picture real quick. So it was like a good life, right? You know, I mean, that's what every young adult or every young guy would want. And other than partying, it is just hanging out with the car clubs, you know. And we even name our car club Young Punk with Sweet Rights, you know, just to raise in Singapore as much as we can. But then it got to me to a point where I realized that my car is going to be an old model in 3 years' time, because every 3 years there's going to be a facelift. And that got me really upset about the impermanence of life. Even when I drive through a puddle, I get really pissed off at the rain because my rims get dirty. So I was pretty much attached to it. Long story short, I crashed my car after a year and my parents decided to sell it. And that actually took off a huge burden in my heart. That's when I started to understand. Clinging on to things don't really make you happy. So, just look at this thing. When I look at it, I tend to laugh at it, because that was how I was like in the past. I was just blinded, you know, couldn't see anything, and I was still thinking that I'm enjoying life and just screwing around. Lost in life. I noticed that people can still be very lost in life, even at a later age as well. That's why we have midlife crisis. Jan, no, the bed club at Muhammad Sultan. This was a supper club, Jan. Yeah, the VIP room. You could book the entire space, and we put all the beds together. Nothing fancy going on. We were just playing UFC and wrestling throughout. I mean, looking back, it was really crappy. And then I was so lost in life. So around 2010, when my girlfriend at the time broke up with me, and I just couldn't find any happiness. I was just really feeling really empty. So my dad told me, why don't I go to Germany to look for my cousin? So I was very drunk because I was an alcoholic. I drink every night. So I remember I was typing on MSN Messenger at the time, just telling him like, hey, I think life sucks. I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm not happy at all. Why don't I just book a ticket and fly to Germany? There's a party by DJ Dean going on. I saw on Facebook. Let's go. And I booked the flight. In 2 weeks' time, I found myself in Germany, and I decided to stay on for 2 months, because I believe that leaving my comfort zone, I can find some kind of meaning or some kind of happiness. But I was just interested in partying even more and getting lit. 8 countries in 50 days. That was what I was interested in, just partying, going really extreme, and then splurging, you know, with the credit card, just shopping and shopping and shopping and shopping. And so so I realized that even going to a new country, my life did not change at all. You know, I was just, this is not going to be like posted online, right? So I was just doing things that what people in Europe would do. That's not a secret, you know. I mean, you're not permitted to smoke on a train anyways, but just getting crazy and intense. So I really wanted to level up at the time, you know, that maybe the parties in Singapore sucks, the Europeans are really cool in partying. So I went hung out with kind of the coolest kids on the block. So this picture is a picture on the right, they were censored. So the green circus, this is their gang sign. You know, and they were known to their group, not the guys in particular over here. They have murdered people before. And on this particular night, why I remember this picture so clearly is because one of them almost died. He was so high on cocaine that he knocked off in the middle of the road. He almost got ran over by a car, you know, and the police had to wake him up. But for some reason, police didn't arrest him, so I have no idea why. So that could have been me, you know. And so just, I fell asleep at home, you know, not in the middle of the road, so that's fine. And if you look at this guy right here, that was me probably in 2010 and 2010. But every time I look back, because I believe that we should revisit the past with fresh new eyes. And when I look at this guy just lying down there thinking he's having the best time of his life, just smiling and laughing, what he did not realize is that in 2 months' time, his life was going to take on a very radical change. So in fact, when I returned to Singapore, I was completely lost. I felt emptier in my heart. What is there to life? Am I going to work and make more money just to continue living a luxurious lifestyle, which obviously is not bringing me any form of happiness? However, that's what society told me. That's, you know, even since young, you know, in Asia, Asian parents were saying that you need to work, if not you end up being a road sweeper, you need to make money, you need to buy these and that. So that's the the conditioning of society. So I just like, man, I should just die at the age of 40. You know, when I start to age and maybe I can't get laid anymore, so, and just screw my life. I don't know what's there. I was so upset that I had a big fight with my mom and tried to burn the entire house down. Thankfully, the house didn't burn because I was so pampered. I did not know that cooking oil was not inflammable. And so I went to Thailand. Someone brought me to Thailand. Say, look, go change your life around. You know, just go get blessing, in. Just go for a week. So at the time, I was dating 3 girls simultaneously. You know, so there were like 3 hot women waiting in Singapore for me. So like, yeah, just go get blessing, come back, change my life, and just continue enjoying life, right? But then when I was in Thailand, my dad's friend brought me there and he said, why don't you try out being a monk? First thing that came to my head is like, I don't want to shave my head and I don't want to shave my eyebrows because in Thailand you have to shave your eyebrows. All right. But at the time I was also curious because I've seen people meditating and I was so impressed, like, how can you sit there and they look really peaceful and calm? So I got so curious about it, but I didn't really Google. I did not know what they were doing, but they just look so peaceful. I remember that I even brought my dates to that temple just to watch people meditating. I would just stand there and I was like, hey, look, wow, they look amazing. I would stand there for like 20 minutes just staring at people meditating. I went to the temple like 5 times or so. So when my dad's friend said that, you know, if you come and become a monk in Thailand for a week, you can learn meditation. I was like, okay, that's interesting, but I do not need to become a monk to learn meditation. And I'm not Buddhist. And in the village, in the monastery, no one could speak English. I could not speak Thai as well. I hated the Thai language. I hated Thai food at the time. I hated Thai people because in Singapore, everyone was going to Thai discos to party, which really pissed me off. So I just did not like anything about Thailand, you see. But then because I felt my dad, and my friend said that if my dad's friend told me, it's like, if you become a monk, your dad has to kneel down, kowtow to you, and call you master. I was like, man, let's do it. Dude, let's just get me ordained. You know, see who's the bigger boss. So he knew how to leverage on my ego. So this was my first day of being a monk. I mean, look at this guy's face, you know. You could tell that it's a very pissed off individual. Like, what am I here for, you know? And why am I doing to eat food that was either too sweet, too salty, or too spicy? I ordained in the south of Thailand, and it's not the kind of Thai food that you get from the restaurants. You know, the flavors were intense. And without the eyebrows or the hair. So at the point I was like, I have no idea what I'm here for. You know, I still could not figure out what guys were saying. They couldn't even clarify what's I and what's you. But I was interested in meditation and changing my life. And I already, 2 days prior to taking this photo, I was not a monk yet. I tweeted, be proud that you slept with a monk. You know, I was a jerk. I was an asshole, basically. And I wanted to prove to people that I could learn something from it. And that was the room that I was in. And you could look at my face. I was still a pissed off young guy, you know, going on alms, and you have to live on alms and, you know, give up all kind of luxuries and having that kind of room, you know, to sleep in. But eventually, this was my first teacher. He brought me, he really guided me around in 3. I was supposed to stay for a week, but I ended up extending my stay because of an experience that I had. I noticed that in meditation, I could identify my anger and know where it was coming from, and that I could transform it. At the same time, I was very caught up by, you know, psychic powers as well, because I felt my body floating. I believe a lot of you who have started meditation, you might have felt like you were levitating and all. So I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. You know, this was better than the drugs that I used to take. So I asked my teacher, and then he told me, yeah, you at first you get to the marijuana state, you know, you felt completely stoned, and then you get on an ecstasy high, but I can show you LSD, you know, just through your mind. I was like, wow, cool. So my teacher was cool. He was tech savvy. He was pretty young, and he used to party a lot when I was young. And he told me that he used to carry a gun around him, that he would scare people off before he became a monk, of course. So he really knew how to guide me in. So from there, I could resonate with his story, and I deepened my practice because I really wanted to change my life. And I also wanted to go back to Singapore and tell my friends what I've learned, you know. So I pushed myself really hard to deepen my meditation practice, to go really deep in and to understand different states of consciousness. This is just one of the photos that I took when I was in Indonesia. This was just about 2 or 3 months in the monkhood, and I realized that I could even mentor a novice at that point of time. You know, that was just like in 2 months' time, my mind started to change. I started to see things very differently. And if you look at this picture here, you can see my face has really changed. You know, it has become more serene. This was just part of me visiting home to my parents' place to give them a blessing. And remember, I gathered my bunch of cronies, you know, to come for a blessing. I just wanted to show off, you see, like, hey, I'm the master, bow down, you know, I'm giving you a blessing. It was kind of funny because at that time, one of the girls just asked, like, hey, we're going to Zouk tonight. Can you change out of your clothes and let's don't feel left out, you know? And she got yelled at by the other guys immediately because she was unaware. At that point of time, I don't feel tempted at all. I was like, no, I'm just going to return home to meditate. So when I saw that I could use my own transformation through meditation to begin teaching my friends and to inspire them how to look at their lives. Because I realized that each and every moment of life, you have a choice. But we lost the access to the choice. And we can blame society, we can blame our conditioning, we say it's difficult. But the movers in society, or the entrepreneurs, those are people who are willing to step out. And I wouldn't say that they're different from the regular people, is that we just realize that there's change. There's a possibility. And we lost that access. And to me, mindfulness is the bridge to go back in, to step up, to make a change if you want. Each and every moment. You could say no, you could say yes to something. So because of that, as I went back to Thailand, I decided that there's so much transformation that my friends saw, and I want to really deepen my meditation. So I decided to take just one meal a day. It's one of the ascetic practices. And this was actually me practicing in the cemetery for 10 days. So at that point of time, I was actually more afraid of the bugs and the insects. Other than ghosts, I've heard a lot of stories that spirits may come and test you. And I actually thought, like, I set an intention like, hey, spirits, you know, if you're there, show yourself. I'm curious how you look like, how's your day like. But because of that, nothing visited me except for mosquitoes. But I could feel fear. I understood fear from there. Because sometimes when I was meditating deep into the night, I could feel things crawling up my thighs. For the record, monks don't wear underpants because underpants was not invented 2,500 years ago in India. So it's just part of the fashion. So when things start creeping up, I would fidget, like, what's that? And I noticed there's nothing there. And that's how powerful the mind can be to just trick us into believing that our greatest fears are surfacing. I'll just skip. Eventually I was tasked with more things to give talks, and I found out about this monk called Ajahn Brahm. He's a Westerner. I was listening to his talks, and I had something that I needed to drop. Because as I practiced 6 months into my meditation, the guilt of the past started to surface and consume me. I beat up my mom when I was 10 years old. And at the age of 14, I almost killed my dad. So around this time when I was meditating, I started seeing those images, especially the uppercut that I sent to my dad's face and his blood squirting all over me, just spilling onto me. And he laying on the ground, his body was quivering and he was puking blood, shooting out. So that image just kept coming up, that all of a sudden I feel that, hey, I don't deserve the transformations I'm getting. I don't deserve being a monk because being a monk is supported by the lay community. I don't deserve goodness. I don't deserve the good experiences I'm getting from meditation. At a point, I've also developed certain kind of psychic abilities, and I said, hey, I don't deserve that as well. I spoke to my dad. He said, hey, son, I've already forgiven you, so you should forgive yourself. I said, no, I don't deserve the forgiveness as well. So I was so trapped within, and more things started to surface. I aborted 3 children. They belonged to 3 different women as well. That came up as well. How I mistreated my brother, how I mistreated other women in the past as well. So, but the first thing I did was to text all the women who I slept with to apologize to them. And then it was surprising. All of them responded and said, thank you. Needed to hear that. And glad that you're doing something about your life. And that's when I realized there was something beautiful about really connecting deeply with someone, not through sex, but through authenticity, through acknowledging the feelings of the other party. So I begin to see what trust was like. But anyways, back to the story. I was so overrun and consumed for 3 months, 3 entire months. I decided that I need to fly to Australia. This was in Serpentine, in Western Australia. This great monk who's known to be able to help people. So I went for a meditation retreat, and eventually it disappeared. I managed to forgive myself completely. And that's why my journey started to teach people self-forgiveness. And now when I think of me beating up my dad, I just feel touched of my father's love and forgiveness. I try to embody that as part of me. So deepening my practice, I even went to India because I've been having tantric experiences. For the record, in Thailand, Tantra doesn't really exist there. So I started having those experiences. I went on Wikipedia. I was like, what is Tibetan Buddhism, or visualizations, subtle energies, and kind of psychedelic experiences. Like, hey, that's what I've been experiencing. So why not just fly to India, and practice and learn. So I really wanted to open up my mind to understand more about it. So just sharing some pictures because, as I mentioned, remember my demeanor in the first monkhood photo? It led to this. And met great people, learning how to connect with people of different nationalities as well. And I met the guy on the left, Michael Apollo. At the time, he was just beginning to develop the Muse headband. He's the founder of the Muse headband. And prior to that, it was very interesting. Before he produced the Muse headband, he created the device where you can use the brain to control a beer on tap. So that was really fascinating. So we had some just brief discussions on psychology at a point of time in India to simulate that. So I decided to go back to Thailand, and I want to deepen my practice and go into the forest monasteries, whereby you live in a lot of austerities. You can only have one set of robes, and how to live in a very minimalistic way. And this was part of the place that I lived in for a long time in Thailand. There's just a mosquito tent, or you could say that, to shield me and to sleep on a hard floor, to really push the body. Because in the forest tradition, we're known to really push the body and to see how the mind reacts. And in fact, it was in the forest monasteries, in the harsh conditions, that I got the most blissful meditations. That is in a kind of way to detach the mind from the body. It's conditioning. You kind of want to sharpen the mind to go deep. And we dye our own ropes, without the dye. So we chop down the jackfruit tree and take out the hardwood, making a chips and they start boiling it and then dump in the ropes, to wash every fortnight. So it's a very organic way of washing the clothes. It actually protects the fabric and it will not stink for 2 weeks. That's why we wash it only every fortnight. But of course, we hang it to air every day. So we have to work a lot in the forest monastery as well, because the teaching in the forest monastery is that your environment is your mind. Because without your mind, you can't experience your environment. So if you wake up and you see a mess everywhere, your mind is going to be messy. But if you keep it clean and spacious, you're going to wake up to freshness. Pretty much like what the Navy SEALs were trained in to make their beds, first thing in the morning. This is one of my teachers in Singapore. So my life really took on a change that we serve the rich and of course the middle class as well, to share teachings, share blessings, and to teach people how to take charge of their lives as well, offer them alternative ways of looking, and of course to cultivate the mind. And even going to third world countries, to raise funds for the schools. In fact, we actually built this school in Cambodia as well. So it was really lovely, beautiful. And I eventually went to France to stay for 1.5 years. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh from Plum Village. It was pivotal for bringing mindfulness into Google and Salesforce. So it really teaches in a very, I would say, today's language. That's how he used it. And very practical ways to develop your mind and understand mindfulness on how to be fully alive. So I decided I need to go there. I need to learn from the community. So that's Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. After he got the stroke, it was a very beautiful experience over there. I wanted to stay there forever. It was very lovely. It's a vegan community, and everything that we eat, most of them are homegrown, so it's organic, and you get good practice. Everyone practicing in mindfulness. You get international business retreats over there. You get sent overseas as well, to run retreats and facilitation. So it was like a community that helps the world to heal and to transform in a non-religious manner, because everything that was taught there was scientific and practical. And we have to work pretty hard as well. In the monasteries, it said that no daily food, no daily work, no daily food. So it's part of learning how to slow down and enjoy the work that you're doing, and not just see it as work, see it as a part of life. Even the nuns, were able to carry the heavy lifting, and it was a very beautiful experience because there was no gender discrimination over there. It's believed that we don't even think of gender equality. We just say that we don't need to identify that, because a lot of problems can come when we take on extremes. We can jump into extreme feminism and all that kind of stuff. So we just believe that everyone is one at the end of the day, and they are all equally as capable. And that's why the nuns were also able to give great teachings and guide people in mindfulness as well. Just me, I realized that being a weed whacker was kind of fun as well. Getting in touch with the plants, In Singapore, you just say that guy, he looks like a foreign worker. So I began to realize the simplicity of life, of how to enjoy, how to truly be alive instead of dragging this corpse, because there's only 2 places that we're rushing to. Number 1 is the hospital, and the second one is to the graveyard. We never really stop to take in those moments, to appreciate, get in touch. It was lovely. In Plum Village, we have picnics as well. Al fresco, some people would join us for music, just to relax, and to express oneself. So it's pretty much a good life over there. You get in touch with the international community, get to learn about different people's stories. Why do they come and join a retreat in the monastery? how they've applied it into their daily lives and into their teams and their homes. And why do people of different nationalities, why do they want to get ordained? I was always very impressed with the nuns, because I know for a guy, a man to shave his head is easy, but for a woman to let go of that beauty, that was really inspiring. And a lot of Western people ordained as well. So it's just part of my family at that point of time. And I think this was what Hendrick was interested in. So in Plant Village, it was the forefront of the neuroscientists. They actually came to do a dialogue, a one-week retreat with the monks and the nuns over there. So I was lucky to be part of it and to be there. So immediately I jumped up to volunteer. So here we're running the quantitative EEG with fMRI. They wanted to collect data on long-term practitioners who practice daily. So the best place to go to was to the monastics. And not a lot of monasteries were open to running this kind of test, because there's this, because they kind of not want to disturb the practitioners in solitude. But Plant Village has always been very open and engaging. So they decided to run tests on long-term practitioners to see, with neurofeedback, to take a look at our brain waves. What is it like? Because this is the first time that monastics were happy to open up for them to run the test. So it's different from Dr. Matthew Ricard's test, whereby they told him to meditate 100% compassion, 70% compassion, to see which part of the brain lights up. So we were tasked to do 3 kinds of practices. So number 1 was just to open our eyes and be relaxed, which was very hard for us to do, because to ask us to relax or not meditate, we drop into meditation immediately. So we really had to try to just relax, not to focus on anything, which is meditation, not to try to stop the mind. So there was 5 minutes of that. And then 5 minutes of closing our eyes and to be relaxed. And finally, another 5 minutes to meditate. So as part of these tests, they collected a lot of data. I believe it's still an ongoing research they're running. They're still working with Sabrina Leblou in France to engage practitioners to come up with more data for this. They really want to see the impact on the brain waves. So there was another test that they did was on, they call it mind mapping. I was not part of the test, but it was very interesting. Because when they ran that test for the mind mapping, with neurofeedback, so neurofeedback actually gives you the biodata of what's going on in the different regions of your brain, and most important of all, just measuring your brain waves, the beta, alpha, the theta, and the delta. Right? Gamma waves is something that has not been fully researched yet, because it exists mostly for deep practitioners in heightened senses of consciousness. When they did a mind map, so one of the nuns actually reported that because we have different kinds of modalities to practice, not just in Plant Village, but around the world, even different kind of psychological practices to regulate the emotions. So they did this test on people who have trauma. So some of the monks, the monastics, were very honest of the kind of traumas that they were still carrying. One of the monks from the Netherlands said that every time someone misjudges him, he will have a tendency, that thought that he just want to stab the shit out of that person. So he was still trying to process that. So they took him in as well. But the interesting thing was what they discovered was that it's not just meditation that helps them to regulate their minds. So they were tasked to bring up those trauma, and try to think of what were the regular practices that these practitioners have been using to work or to transform those traumas. So the first thing they discovered was that for some of the practitioners, the more senior practitioners, when they bring up these traumatic incidents and memories, there was no harmful emotions coming up. The amygdala did not, that means the fight or flight response did not even react at all. They saw more activity in the regions of brain associated with happiness. So that was really interesting to see how trauma can really be cleared. And for some of them, they realized that they discovered that the practices that they have been so accustomed to and trying to use to deal with their emotions and trauma did not actually work that well. So they were tasked to think of like music that they enjoy, or some of them to enjoy poetry, things like that. So what we discovered was one of the nuns, all she had to do was to sing a song. Immediately the brainwave started to regulate. And that was actually the way for her to regulate her brainwaves and to process it. The train, because neurofeedback is also is a kind of brainwave training for people with brain dysfunction, right? So to target it. But one thing is that although it is pure science, but in the scientific community, it is not being accepted yet. Neurofeedback, there's a lot of resistance saying that there's not enough data and research done on it. So even those neuroscientists that came, they knew that it's a barrier that they have to cross. And the modest Plum Village and that group of scientists were trying to really create that. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, because he got a stroke, he's a meditation master in himself. But when he got a stroke, people got curious why he could not meditate. And that was when Dr. Fisher, one of the doctors who has been running neurofeedback research and brainwave training for a long time, he's also a student of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, decided to teach Thich Nhat Hanh neurofeedback to see what went wrong. And what they discovered was that the reason Thich Nhat Hanh couldn't meditate because that part of his brain was damaged. So physically in his brain, he lost access to meditate. So with neurofeedback, they were able to allow him to gain the access to that region of the brain where he could kickstart his meditation again, so that he could regulate, he could be more focused in his mind. Otherwise, he's really subject to the stroke that he was having and all the pains. And they decided that Dr. Fisher can't be with him all the time, so they needed a monk, one of his attendants to do that. So they got a senior teacher from the Plum Village tradition to train him in neurofeedback. And at the same time, that monk has been doing a lot of neuroscience studies. So when they measured his brainwave, that was the amazing part. The moment that monk started meditating, all his brainwaves resetted, like just flatlined. So they was like, this has never been seen before. And they had no idea what happened. There could be a dead person, right? But the monk is not dead, he's still alive. And that is something that they're trying to really research into. And to me, that's phenomenal on how they can measure that. And then because of that, we thought of they creating a device, a portable device perhaps, that we could use it. I know the Muse headband, there are other headbands that are doing it, but the research done on it is still very limited. We want to see how, by using those biofeedback, we could use the existing meditations that we have, or to alter them to our own predisposition, to bring us into heightened states of consciousness. Because in Buddhism in itself, those states of meditation absorptions, or we call it jhanas, can lead us to really deep states. You're talking more about the gamma and the delta and the theta waves, to gain a kind of spiritual liberation or awakening. So it's not using something to induce, but with the live data feedback to create an algorithm based on your own individual practice and predisposition. So I believe that's going to take a long time, and I'm kind of bounded by certain kind of NDAs to review that. So that was beautiful. All right, we can leave the questions for later. Anyways, talking about happiness, in the brain. So that was me towards the end of my monkhood journey, really smiling and being very happy. I wanted to stay for kind of enjoy my life in Plum Village, because I realized that I could be more childlike in my behavior. So you look at a photo or just walking around holding Pringles and snacking, you know, trying to be a child again, embracing the inner child to come out. And in Plum Village, this was taken with just a cell phone. You know, this is what you kind of wake up to in summer. That's how beautiful it is. The beauty of this place is that I get to practice, I get to learn, I get to meet people, I get to just support the community that brings healing to the world. I realized that I do not need to be a teacher anymore. I could just be part of a big community. I'm happy to chop vegetables and to cook every day. You know, I drop my ego or the need or the desire that I need to teach. But then there was some issues with my visa that I had to return to Singapore. And there was a desire for me to share the practices and to find new ways to reach out to people. And I also realized that being a monk or putting on the robes, you know, people will have this religious stigma. I mean, if I'm a monk, I probably wouldn't be here right now talking, because I would not be doing the work that I've been doing for the last 2 years. So I was kind of afraid of returning to the lay life. It was a difficult choice to make, because I really wanted to be a monk for the rest of my life. But my teacher, or my teachers, he said that if you don't walk amongst the people, how are you going to reach out to people? If that's the meaning that you see in your life, and it's going to be tough, you need to step out of your comfort zone, which I agreed. Being a monk was a comfort zone for me. So I decided that I have to disrobe. I have to descend the mountain. I have to leave, you know, this beautiful community to find ways for myself. So I had only $2,000 in my bank account at that point of time. My parents were divorced. They divorced when I was a monk, and I obviously have nowhere to stay. So I really got the push, and I was so afraid of what I'm going to do. I have no experience in running businesses, nothing at all. You know, I've been practicing as a monk for 5 years, right? But I decided that because this was what I want to do in my life, that I have to do. The conditions have pushed me back to Singapore. I have to do it. I have to learn how to embrace it. I have to put the teachings and the practices that I've been sharing to test, and maybe make it into my life journey. And that's why I'm sharing today. And that's why I decided to come back. And when I look at this picture again, that sometimes we can be clueless about life. We can think that our comfort zones are bringing us ultimate happiness. But what we do not know that is that when we go against the odds, we defy our egos, our own fears. And because we deep down, we know what's important for us, and we just step out one step at a time. That could be the beginning of a new chapter, a new story to share, and that we can be inspired by our own stories. And that's why I leave it, I'll end the sharing here, that this is my story, and I hope you enjoy listening to my story. And most important of all, I believe each and every one of you have a story to tell. It's really being written. What matters most is that whether you are dwelling on a single page, or you're going to start on a new page, write down chapter 2 or even chapter 3, and allow yourself to be motivated and inspired by a story, because I believe that everyone has something to share, something to contribute. So thank you, and I'll just leave it. This is just some of my info. I believe Jen will share later, so I'm just going to hand it back to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's very brave that you would, you know, surface your past to, you know, show it to all of us. I think all these thoughts, I have so many, like, you know, I think I told you before, I had so many questions about, you know, how you went through the journey from then to now, and I think you've answered a lot of them for me personally. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or leave them in the chat. I guess what I kind of wanted to we're curious about, because as a community of science and tech people who are trying to connect spirituality, what would you kind of with your experience working with scientists and then having that traditional background from learning meditation, what are the common pitfalls would you advise us as a community to not fall into when trying to connect science and contemplation or meditation? You're muted.
That's a good question. I think we have to understand that when we are looking into the contemplative traditions, I mean, a lot of them are coming from the East right now. Most of the research is being done with the Eastern traditions, and that the Eastern traditions are based more on empirical evidence. And the West is more, we have hypotheses, we have speculations, we want to prove that hypotheses work, right? So it's not that empirical. So we have to be mindful that we may be, in the West, we may be lacking the right apparatus and the right tools to measure what the Easterners are going through, are experiencing. So I believe that more dialogues do have to happen. And I think the Dalai Lama has been doing a lot of these dialogues. But if you talk about awakening our consciousness or opening up, assessing different states of higher consciousness, we really need to be able to experience for ourselves first. Or otherwise, the language that we use, this is a problem with linguistics as well. Someone says awakening, everyone has a different idea of what awakening means. So I believe that is to go into a deep, in-depth research to understand, have at least a fundamental grasping of those terminologies. Then that's where it starts to open up, that we can communicate better with the traditionalists of the East. But I do see it happening, which is why, and what CoHack is for as well, right? I believe. Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying, how people who are maybe not familiar with religious rites or traditional ways of mindfulness will find all these things like woo-woo. But when you were practicing and these scientists came to you to want to measure your brainwaves, do you think that they were woo-woo?
Okay, I think to be fair, I mean, the scientists, when they talk about neuroscience, they have really been exposed, to traditional mindfulness as well, right? And they don't. I think the only woo part was when one of the monks' brainwaves just stopped on all levels. It just flatlined. There wasn't anything, because we were not trying to measure any kind of heightened states of consciousness. We only had 5 minutes, so
right,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, I imagine it's quite hard to when you mentioned that you guys were told to relax, right, without meditation, but then that's actually kind of meditation. Because I watched a video recently where this neuroscientist was trying to demonstrate how a person's brainwaves would look like if that person's meditating. And when that person started meditating, immediately, because he was showing it on a screen on a wall, immediately it just dipped or just leveled out, and it was crazy. Everyone couldn't believe it what they saw.
That's right. I think one more thing is that on gamma waves they need to do more research as well. It's very limited, because that's where the brainwaves really shoot up high.
You mentioned earlier that you consulted for a local mindfulness app, right? MindFi. Yeah.
Yep.
What can you share with us a bit more about how that experience was and what you actually did?
Well, that was really interesting, because there's a lot of meditation apps where you need to practice with your eyes closed. But MindFi believes that you want to bring informal practices out into the world, whereby you can practice while queuing up for food. You can practice with your eyes open. So the whole tagline is that meditating with your eyes open. So they come with about 3 to 5 minutes tracks, and we identified 8 of the moods that people usually go through, feeling neutral, happy, sad, angry, unmotivated, and all. So when I went there, the app was already launched, so I was helping with the review of the app, And we decided to do a mood, something based on mood. So a user could go in and select one of the moods, and then we'll plan out the pathway. So there were already pre-recorded meditations over there. And we work with a leading clinical psychologist who's also one of the mindfulness leaders in the world, that he actually identified what kind of training we need to give to people in those moods. For example, is it a focus training, open awareness, loving kindness, self-care, kind of meditations. So I was tasked with actually bringing in the existing meditation tracks, that were not designed to target those moods. So I had to kind of structure it out on what would the user experience be like, and I was also tasked to come out with scripts as well. So one of the hardest scripts for me to compose, a guided meditation was when someone is feeling unmotivated. I'm really unmotivated. What do you want me to do? We're not trying to come in to push them, but you need to use mindfulness techniques. So I created some of those tracks, and we got invited different mindfulness teachers to come and record them. So that was the interesting part. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So audience, you guys are all strangely very quiet this time around. Usually they have quite a bit of conversation going. We have to go into the contemplative meditation segment soon. So I just wanted to kind of ensure that you guys don't have any questions, or like, what are your thoughts or feelings about, the stories that DK has shared? Do you have your own stories as well that you wanna share and find some resonation with DK's experience? Like
Rod had a question.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, thanks, Shane.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Okay.
That's all right. No, the question I had was, I've tried different meditation techniques, and I'm constantly trying to find the meditation which actually gets me to a state of the so-called bliss, or a consistency in the meditation where every time I do it, I get to that specific state where I'm actually completely mindful, and also I can improve my psychic powers or whatever that I want to achieve, right? But it's very inconsistent. And so what happens, I practice for a while, then I fall off it. So I wanted to check with you, have you come across a method or a tool or a hack which helps you to get there consistently and keep on improving and attain the state of bliss and mindfulness and improvement in terms of all your other powers that you get?
All right. I do run classes as well to help people develop their consciousness and to get into kind of altered states of consciousnesses. But I'm very old school, so I don't, other than using brainwave music, so which I do have patron, believe Jen will share post with me or something. Like I do guided meditations as well with the brainwave audio, to help to regulate. So I see science as a great tool, as a complementary apparatus to help us to develop. I guess most important thing is that the more you want psychic abilities, the more they won't come. I say that from experience. And that's happened to the people that I train as well. I know it's very hard when it comes like, I want to learn that, but I always ask like, why do you want? Like people say they want to open their third eye. I was like, these two eyes, haven't they seen enough problems in society? Do you want a third one to see more? I guess to really understand why we need that. And some people may think that, maybe because if I open up my abilities, I could help more people. Then I like to ask the question, does that mean that you don't have any? No, I think it should be like, you should trust yourself more, that you don't need these abilities, to help people. We can help people in each and every unique ways. Why am I saying this is because the moment you let go of those desires, your vibration will have changed. Because the more we think that I want, we are also subconsciously telling us that I do not have, I'm not enough. So energetically, we're putting that limitation into us. Does that make sense?
The problem is we are also goal-oriented in our lives, that everything has to have a goal. And I think that's a very good point you bring in. It's like, don't have a goal, just do it.
The goal is important as well. But then when we start on a path, we don't have to think so much, because life is like looking at a map, right? GPS. But let's say you're walking and just staring at the GPS, or if you're driving, you crash, or just stare, you don't walk, it doesn't work. But you only refer to the GPS when you need it. So that was the goal. That's the plan. All right. I would say blissful states of meditation. That there are things like we'll talk about the news headbands, which I heard that it can help you to regulate as well. There are certain pranayamas that you can practice. The whole point is like is to be relaxed in it. It's not so much of a focus, like I shared earlier on, that when they told us not to meditate, that's when our meditation was the most blissful. But I'm happy to share more information as well.
Yeah, we have a social hour later, so we can also discuss more in detail. William has a question. William, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thanks for the talk, Hendrick. That was very helpful. I would like to just first of all say that if anyone finds myself kind of rambling, please interrupt me, because I'm gonna kind of go on a stream of consciousness here, because a lot of what you had shared in your presentation deeply resonates with me as well. I'm from Tokyo, and I've been a part of the CoHack community for about a year here as well. And I also had a very sort of troubled childhood. I never went as far as murdering my father or anything like that, or trying to at least, but I definitely had murderous rage inside of me. My parents were also divorced, and I think I was an alcoholic by the age of my teenage years, early teenage years. And I had a lot of anger, and I actually went down a very similar path as you would, all the nightclubs and the drugs and all this stuff. And actually, for me, it was that substances like LSD were actually a catalyst for me to sort of wake up. It was sort of like rather than the alcohol, which is sort of like a depressant, it was a stimulant, and I became aware of my inner state to such a degree that I could not ignore it anymore. And I was like, I have all these issues, and I don't think that I can, now that I'm aware of how much it's affecting me, I can't really ignore it anymore, because it's sort of like I open my eyes and then it kind of shut back down. And I've also trained with Zen monks here in Tokyo, in Hakone, which is like a hot spring village. Incidentally, I was also working at a plum shop. So we were selling dried plums. So I think we have a lot in common, actually. And that monk, he actually teaches mindfulness at Google here in Japan. He's half German and half Japanese, and he grew up in Harajuku, which is a very noisy part of town, and very famous as well. And I realized, actually, when I was learning from him, at that point I had done so many drugs and had actually studied yoga and read a lot of things, that I was beginning to see how he was sort of getting trapped in his own ego, because I was seeing the way that he was treating other people. And I kind of dropped this image or idea of like wanting to follow a guru or something, because I thought that was, it's something that I feel like the inner voice is the best thing to sort of listen to. But I also struggled, because what I realized was that as I furthered my contemplative practices, I did notice more things surfacing, but I didn't really have a path or a plan. And I would actually begin to experience very discomforting, like physical symptoms. Like I would start having seizures, for example, or if we're talking about our third eye opening or something, having visions and things like this. And I felt like I wasn't very well equipped to deal with what I was trying to deal with. But at the same time, I was struggling to find the necessary resources around me in order to really create a path for myself. And my question to you is, I think many people have different traumas, different issues that they're dealing with, different goals perhaps that they want to get to. And do you think that, I guess with the aid of technology as well, do you think that there needs to be more, structure in a way in approaching the mind, especially with the advent of technology that would actually potentially accelerate the process? Because I feel personally that just like how computers have really radically changed our lives, if we don't really control a tool properly, it can really destroy people's lives. And I think mindfulness and meditation, or the brain itself, is a tool that was really meant to serve our own happiness and peace and just experiencing a positive and good life. But if we don't know how to tame it, so to speak, or control it properly, it can really actually cause a lot of problems. And like you were saying, all these demons can come up from inside of you and so on. So I would like a little bit of your perspective, especially because you have also dealt with these things before and in the process, because I think more and more people will become interested in these kinds of technologies as it becomes more commonplace.
Great. Thanks, William, for sharing as well. It's good to hear that a lot of things resonated on your level. I resonated with that as well. For the record as well, I do practice under a teacher who turned out to projecting his younger self onto me, a lot of ego. So that caused me some kind of suffering as well, to go through some kind of coaching to remove them. And yeah, I think number one is that when we want to get into these kind of experiences, a spiritual teacher is always important. As much as we want to honor and respect, the scientific field, right? We can honor a professor, a researcher, but because we're trying to understand the mind and consciousness, and these studies, consciousness studies, has been done for thousands of years, but in a way that is not congruent with our modern technology and our modern education, right? So as mentioned earlier, like both of them do have to converge, and I do see them converging. Regarding using these tools, there are certain kind of technology right now, or even substances that allow us to access, open up our brains or open up our consciousness. That there is, it's good for people who are controlled or minds are strong enough to go through it, to get an experience of it, of how it's like and how we can bring it further. I mean, that's why all these tech are coming up, right? Because people have experienced it. But I see there is a danger there as well. Number one, it could become a dependency. And there are technology coming out not just to boost someone's happiness or to make employees more happy so they become more productive and to make more money for the organization. It's being abused in that way. That there are people who are resistant towards, or in fact having aversion towards mindfulness because of that right now. And also that for the way I practice, right, it's to peel through the layers, with mindfulness and learning the right kind of introspection, learning about the emotions, learning how things are transient in nature, how they're interconnected, So it's like going through those layers and working on different kind of traumas or different kind of habits, bit by bit, until I assess the unconscious mind, because the unconscious mind can be assessed through meditation. So I went through that, but what am I doing when I'm going through those levels? Right, I'm exercising my mindfulness muscle, my introspection muscle, my emotional intelligence, and at the same time, I'm restoring trust and faith within myself, right? And understanding more and more about the non-dual nature of consciousness and how it can project out into the world, right? Because in the actual fact, our conscious mind in itself is the universe. I mean, without your consciousness right now, you can't perceive anything, right? And the body is in itself a roadmap to the universe as well. We talk about supernormal powers. But the thing is that when we use certain kind of substances, and we build a reliance on that, what those substances and certain kind of tech can do is that it gives you an immediate access into the unconscious mind. Like right immediately, then the next thing is that it just pulls you out. So you have an experience, but what happens when you go and you access the unconscious mind? The moment you come back up, because you've seen it, you're beginning to operate. The lines are not that blur anymore. So when you function, you're also functioning a bit on your unconscious mind. So what if there's a 1 degree, or what appears to be a 1 degree slight change in the unconscious, but you have no more access to it? When it goes up to your conscious mind, it can really create a drastic change for better or for worse. So that is the danger that I see, that I feel that it should be structured, yes, in a certain way, that we could use a kind of tech to kind of give like the neurofeedback, the biodata, and maybe a little bit of aids, like to me, like certain kind of music or sound, things that are safe, that people can't abuse, right? That is being guided through, and while we have the feedback on the biodata on how we are assessing those states and what we need to do with in each surface to get there. So that is a very gradual path. Because for me, the way I train people is that they know how to gain the access back to their unconscious minds on their own. So you can always travel up and down to make the transformations as needed, or to even or right in terms of manifestations and all. That can all be done in a very safe manner. So that's my take on it. Otherwise, I have clients coming to me where they kind of screwed up their consciousness because of the induction methods. But it doesn't happen to everyone. Only for some people it can be screwed up, but in fact, a lot of people got screwed up without knowing.
Right. I guess like sometimes I feel like it's like opening Pandora's box or something, and it's like, you got to really be careful how you're approaching the problem, because it's even with like mental technologies, like focusing your attention. It's like, okay, like put that in the hands of like someone that's very destructive, and you get like a catastrophe, someone that's going to create a catastrophe or something, right? It's like you don't want to give a gun to a 3-year-old, so to speak. So that's, and actually when people things like LSD, for example, as a tool to access the unconscious, I've also heard horror stories of people that become aware of their own suicidal tendencies, and they end up like getting into a car accident because they're dissociating. Or even something as simple as mindfulness, it becomes a tool to actually dissociate. It's like, oh, I'm being mindful, and they're actually just doing the total opposite, or not really opposite, but it's just like they don't want to deal with their problems, and then they end up going into mindfulness, or even actually saying that they're going to practice as a monk or something. And it's, for me, it's like whenever I see that in myself, but also in other people, it sort of makes me think of the importance of actually these wisdom traditions, as well as a path that's not carved out to the extent that if you get off, you're totally, screwed or something. But there should be some kind of like intention, as well as a path carved out, so that people know if they're doing the right thing, if they're if their direction is in line with their purpose or their mission or something.
So, yes, exactly. I totally agree with that on the intention on why we're trying to open this up, right? What are we targeting at? And the other thing about the unconscious mind, I think one thing I have to highlight on is that when we come back to operating on based on our conscious mind, right? I mean, everything that we think, it has an impact. It goes directly straight into the unconscious mind, because we already gain access to it. And what it means that is actually projecting out into our physical space, our physical reality. For someone who has never gained an access into their unconscious mind, it's fine. They can think whatever shit they want. Their repercussion may not be as huge, but for someone who has access it, let's say that person has not built up his or her emotional intelligence, doesn't know how to do with depressive states, like anger, sadness, or pessimism, and when they have that kind of thoughts, it's going to create their reality. The energy, the vibration is going to come back to them. So that is the dangerous part. So I guess for someone who is like naturally just happy-go-lucky and probably positive, and if they just get that shot of substance or anything that allows them to access the unconscious mind, then in a way, like to just put it very bluntly, on the surface, you could say it's relatively safe. But the thing is that because it jumps straight to the unconscious, it bypasses the subconscious. You never know what's being buried in our subconscious, right? So I mean that's my take on it. But I do see that when we have the common intention, the common goal, the understanding is there, and the right dialogues and the right clarifications, then this can be a very useful tool on how we can really help, go in. So yes, intention setting at the end of the day.
And just lastly, do you think, therefore, the teachings around like Buddhism, for example, do you think the teachings should be placed with just as much weight as the techniques themselves?
Of course, I mean there is a teaching and everything. Like if science comes without ethics, we have witnessed the problems.